Please stand. My brothers and sisters, we listen attentively to the good news as recorded by Matthew. Jesus, again, in reply, spoke to the chief priests and elders of the people in parables. He said, "The kingdom of heaven may be likened to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son. He dispatched his servants to summon the invited guests to the feast, but they refused to come. A second time he sent other servants saying, 'Tell those invited, behold, I have prepared a banquet. My calves and fatted cattle are killed and everything is ready. Come to the feast.' Some ignored the invitation and went away, one to his farm, another to his business. The rest laid hold of his servants, mistreated them, and killed them. The king, of course, is enraged and sends his troops, destroyed those murderers, and burnt their city. Then he said to his servants, 'The feast is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy to come. Go out, therefore, into all the roads in the area and invite to the feast whomever you find.' The servants went out into the streets and gathered every single individual they found, good and bad alike, and the hall was filled with guests." The gospel of Christ. Praise be to you, Christ. Please be seated. You know, Connie, I'm really glad you're here today. There was that time where this church was meant to be closed, that the school was just sort of a dream, an idea, and yet at the same time, the floor that you and Cindy put down never bubbled up or anything. You guys did a great job, really. It has survived all these years. The school now has, 70, 80 students on a regular basis, day in and day out. And this church, besides the people who gather here in person, face to face, there are some 20 to 30,000 who participate every single week online. Don't tell me there's nothing that our God can do. And everyone anticipated that this place was meant to be closed and shut down. And right now there were meant to be 3 or 4 homes on this property, right, that a developer would put here. And yet God took a handful of people, stubborn people, who would not, say no, and really formulated. And this community has grown a true community of believers in Jesus Christ. We never thought that the school would be 15 years old now and moving forward, and the church would be here. I'm pastor here now 21 years as of this past August. God is pretty amazing, right? God is pretty amazing. But really, Connie, it's because of individuals like you who believed, despite what they saw. And so, you, Cindy, and all the hours you put in, and I think we still take really good care of those curtains you sewed for the bathrooms over there. Yeah, I think they're still there. We've had them treated a couple of times. This is no way inviting you to sew us more. I'm not inclining any of that at all. But now that you're here, if you could take a measurement. So Jesus is continuing to have this argument with the scribes and the Pharisees. And of course, the scribes and Pharisees believe that they actually have it all right. That how they are, what they think, what they believe, what they force upon the people to do, the laws that they entrust upon the people that they have to fulfill, the requirement for tithing, all of these activities, none of which are really formulated or founded on anything besides their own desire to make sure that these people are being holy, and they're judging their holiness not by what is the disposition of their heart, but rather what is the disposition of their actions, or really their tithing, to the synagogue. So Jesus has a real problem with religion. We have to recognize that a lot of these encounters that he has with the scribes and Pharisees are not supportive of the established religion of the time, because it's not the heart of the law, which for Jesus is meant to be love and mercy. And yet the institution, the synagogue, the temple, is not able to show that and does not show that to the people. And so Jesus has a real problem. And so this is what he is talking about here. He's saying that the kingdom of heaven is likened to a king who has already established an amazing banquet. So he sends out this invitation, and the people who are meant to be invited don't come. I don't know about you. When I get an invite, there's a process that goes through my head. And now I know I'll never get an invite ever again. But there is a process that goes through my head about, okay, who is the person sending the invitation? Do I like the person who sent the invitation? How close are they to me? And also, what else is happening on that date that might rival the invitation that I get from them? Don't all look at me like that. You all do exactly the same thing. You're just not willing to admit it in front of all these people. So the fact is, you go through this process, and in and through the process, you make a determination whether or not you're going to respond to the invitation. Most of the time, you respond to the invitation because you truly are very interested in what the invitation is for and who it is that is sending you. There is a connection. There is a connection that is very clearly already established, that you already know the person who is inviting you. You have a long-standing relationship with them. You have a sense of devotion, love, deep sentiment for that person. And so whatever they're celebrating, whatever it is, the planting of their outdoor trees, you would go because that person is fundamentally important to you, and their voice and their presence in your life makes all the difference. That without them in your life, you would feel a void, you would feel an emptiness. So you literally, and we make sacrifices to respond to people's invitations. We do, because it means that it's less time that we have by ourselves, less time that we have with our families, less things that we can check off our to-do list, because now this requires us to travel there, to participate, and then to get back home, which obviously is a chunk of time. We are making that type of a sacrifice because of the endearment that we have, the knowledge we have, the personal attestation we have of the person sending the invitation. I'm going over that part over and over again because here Jesus is pretty much pointing out to the scribes and Pharisees that here is God inviting you to a celebration, inviting you to a banquet, and you are not responding, and the question is, why? Why are you not responding? And ultimately, what Jesus comes to say is that, he sends out the king, sends out multiple invitations. One is verbal. Then he sends out actually people to go and knock on people's doors and say, hey, we're having this party, you should come. The king is going out of his way to make sure that all of his servants, the people whom the king loves so dearly, is invited to come, are invited to come. And recognize there's no requirements here. It's not saying you need to bring a gift. It's just simply saying, I've already established a feast. And listen, for Jesus' day, this is big stuff. My calves and fatted cattle are killed. The fatted cattle are already grown animals, but the calves are the future generation of what the king would use to celebrate in the future. And yet at the same time, he is sacrificing everything to make sure this banquet is the best of all banquets. And he's saying that to them. It's all done, and this is all the preparation I've done. This is going to be an amazing party. Come to the festival, come to the banquet. And they don't respond. And the reason Jesus is pointing out that they don't respond is because of the fact they don't know the person who is inviting them. There's no connection. There's no love. There's no deep admiration for the person who is inviting, because it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. If you knew the person who is inviting you and you cared about that person, you would go out of your way and go. And it wouldn't take more than one invitation. I don't know about you. When we get an invite, we just get one. We go, we don't. But it's not as though people go out of their way to say, hey, listen, we really want you there. Come. It's one invitation. This king, God the Father, is going over and over and over to make sure that they're aware that they're invited, that this is ready, that you should come now. And the invitation continues even when they rejected the first invitation, when they didn't come the first time. He still sends out his personal prophets. He sends out his prophets and he says to them, the banquet is ready. The relationship is ready. All you have to do is respond. Come to the party. And of course they deny and they say no. And why? Because I believe that Jesus is trying to indicate that as much as you know what the king wants and you know the king's laws, rules, and regulations for his kingdom, you don't have a personal relationship. So it doesn't matter that this king, God the Father, has invited you because you don't know who he is. You don't have a relationship. You're not in love with him the way he is in love with you. And so now this is what really gets the scribes and Pharisees irked, as if that wasn't bad enough. Jesus goes on to say that the king then sends out his servants, and he tells them, anyone. And Jesus says, bad and good alike. Notice the language. It's not good and bad. It's bad and good alike is the language he uses, meaning that everyone is invited to the banquet. Everyone is gathered around. And you can't tell me that as scribes and Pharisees of temples and synagogues who see themselves as the ultimate manifestation and representation of God here on earth, that they not in some way, shape, or form are not really put off that now because they've said no, God has gone out and ultimately has invited anyone who is willing to come, even those who are bad, even those who don't follow the law, those who don't follow the rules. How is that possible? But that is how great the King, the Father's love is for us. That's what the purpose was. The purpose was also meant for them, because what they don't understand, the scribes and Pharisees, is as much as they are trying to earn God's love by their actions, by their rules, their regulations, by their disciplines and the like, despite all of that, none of that can attain for us what God has already given us. And especially for us who consider ourselves believers in Jesus Christ, the cross has forever and always sealed for us the Father's invitation. It is always there. We are the bad and the good alike being invited, and the invitation is there for us. What we don't know is how many of the bad and good alike actually come to the invitation. See, because the problem is exactly how is that invitation being put forth? It really does make a difference. And we see it in our own institutions. In some cases, we who represent what we believe Jesus would want and hopefully would gather us together as his people into what he called his church. There is ultimately, how is that invitation communicated? Is it that we are loved and accepted exactly the way we are? That there's nothing more that we need to do, that Jesus has accomplished all of that, and all we have to do is respond? See, because sometimes for us, unless there is a high cost or value to something like this, we don't believe that it's worth anything. All right? You go to a really nice restaurant, but the restaurant, the meal is only $2. No one believes that food's worth anything because it's only $2. It's not going to taste as good as something that's $30 or $40. I'm not making this up, it's true. And yet at the same time, you can go to a $30, $40 a plate meal and not be very satisfied with the quality or the food. But we are very inclined, because we have been trained or conditioned, that the more you pay for something, the more valuable it is for us. Look at cars. We do the same thing with cars. You take a car and you put a different name on a car, right? And there are so many cars out here that all look like one another now, right? And they all range in prices. But I can tell you time and time again, if people can, they're going to choose the car that is the most expensive because there is this belief that somehow this car is better because it's more expensive than a car that has exactly all the same bells and whistles, made in another part of the world, and is half the price. But we're not comfortable with that because, well, it's only half the price. And the problem we have, I think, as Christians, as believers in Jesus, is I think we ourselves struggle with how have we been invited? What do we believe the invitation is? Are we really, truly accepted right now as you are? All of our brokenness, all of our sinfulness, as imperfect as every single day you and I live in the imperfections of what it means to be human, no matter how well intended and how our heart is focused and desirous to be as loving and caring as we can, you end up in a parking lot on the Hutch River, and all of a sudden, all of that is right out the window because you are not in a very good mood, and that mood impacts the way you feel. And now everyone that you promised in the morning that you would love and care for and nurture and support, now all those people you wish would just get out of your way. We're broken human beings. We're broken human beings. And because of our brokenness, we don't trust the invitation. Because if the invitation is proper, the way Jesus had wanted it to be, then we should be totally open to saying to God, yes, I am that bad person that you've met on the road, but I really want to come to the banquet. I am imperfect, but I really want to come to the banquet because I hear your voice and I believe that you are trustworthy. Other institutions basically tell us we're bad people, and there is no invitation because we're bad people. Because we're bad people, unless we become good people, we don't get into heaven. And for the likes of me, for all the years that I've been doing what I'm doing, I'm still trying to figure out exactly how you ever get to be right with God on our own terms or through our own actions. Because I don't think that's possible. God's God. We're not. We're just creators. We're creatures that the Creator has made. It's Jesus' blood that has redeemed us and sanctified us and made us righteous in God's eyes. And even though Jesus has died on the cross and rose from the dead, you and I still live in trepidation that somehow God is judging us, that God waits for us to make a mistake. And then I can't tell you how many times people say that when they're sick or when they're suffering or finances get difficult or their relationships are in struggle, all of a sudden, why is God doing this to me? Oh, I know why. And they rattle off all of the stuff that every human being suffers and struggles through. And you know why? Because we're human beings. I am not asking us to be promiscuous with sinfulness or not to be trying the best that we can. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that we should not be trying to be loving, caring people every second of this life that God has given to us. A life which, by the way, we have been redeemed by Jesus, and Jesus is with us. But we must be willing to accept the invitation and to be willing to enter into the banquet even though we're broken, and recognize that the very fact that we've been invited into the banquet makes all the difference to us. And we will continue to try, and we will continue to struggle. And when we fall, when we stumble, when we make mistakes, when we sort of wander outside the banquet hall, the Father still waits for us to come back. Most of our trouble with this is us, because of how we see ourselves. Because someone, some institution somewhere, scribes and Pharisees, much like what they've said, some institution or person somewhere has told us that we're not good enough. And unless we get right with God, we're never allowed into His presence. I'm sorry, doesn't that undercut what Jesus has already accomplished on the cross? This event has already taken place. This is done. This is accomplished. His words, not mine. It is accomplished. Not that it's the first step of accomplishment, or we got it started, Father, or, this is a great beginning. No, it is accomplished. The rest is up to us to recognize who it is and whether or not that person, Jesus, is trustworthy. Is he trustworthy? And if he is, and if we believe in his death and his resurrection, then you have to ask yourself, why do we still live such miserable lives? Why are we always so worried and anxious? Why are we so worried? And immediately the first thing we dismiss is religion, because we think religion is this hoax around trying to get to God. And then sometimes in some relationships and places it is, but it doesn't. Religion and Jesus are not the same. Sometimes they are. Hopefully most of the time they are. But religion and Jesus, the person of Jesus, the spirit of Jesus, are not the same. You and I are being invited by the Father to celebrate in a banquet now. Notice the story. This isn't about what is to come. Jesus isn't talking about when we die, we get to go there. There is a banquet right now that you and I are invited to fully participate in. And we have to ask ourselves, do we feel the joy and the excitement? Have we had the fatted calf and the cow? Have we really experienced the joy of being redeemed? Or are some voices and statements running around our head distracting us from what it is that Jesus clearly made a point of pointing out 2,000 years ago, that somehow, and isn't it just humanity? Churches are human institutions. We do this to ourselves always. We can't believe this. It's too good to be true. It's Jesus who says it. Are you saying Jesus isn't trustworthy? We really have to ask, what is it that we believe? And if we're not experiencing the joy of being people already celebrating the banquet of the kingdom with the King, then we really have to analyze where that comes from. And we have to push it aside and trust beyond all trust that this Jesus is trustworthy. His death and his resurrection is a promise. And you and I are invited every single moment of every single day of our existence to enter into and celebrate the banquet with the Father. God bless you.